People think elevators are just metal boxes on ropes. They aren't. They're complex vertical trains running on a track that goes straight to hell if a single brake pad fails or a governor cable snaps. I've been a level 4 technician for Metro State Lift Services for 15 years. I've spent more time dangling in pitch black shafts than I have in my own living room. I've pulled dead rats out of motor gears, found homeless guys sleeping on top of cabs, and once, unfortunately, had to help fire rescue retrieve a businessman who tried to surf a freight elevator and lost his balance. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in tension ratings, hydraulic pressure, and gravity. That's what I told myself anyway. Before last Tuesday. It started with a call at 2:47 a.m. The dispatch tone on my phone cut through the silence of my apartment like a dentist's drill. I groaned, rolling over to check the screen. Priority 1. Entrapment. Archwood Tower. Unit. Car 3. I rubbed the grit out of my eyes. The Archwood Tower is this ugly, brutalist concrete slab downtown, built in the late 80s. It has 22 floors of generic law firms and dental practices. It's the kind of building that always smells faintly of floor wax and desperation. I didn't rush. Entrapment usually just means the safety interlocks tripped and the computer froze, trapping the car between floors. Usually it's empty at this hour. If someone was inside, they were probably a drunk salaryman who fell asleep against the control panel. I pulled my van into the service alley at 3:15 a.m. The city was dead silent. That heavy, oppressive, quiet you only get right before dawn. A light rain had started falling, making the asphalt shine like black oil. I swiped my keycard at the service entrance. The heavy steel door groaned as I pulled it open, the sound echoing way too loudly in the empty loading dock. The air inside was stale, recycled coldness. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. The night security guard, a guy named Miller, was usually posted at the front desk, but the lobby was empty. His coffee mug was sitting on the counter, a thin film of mold forming on the surface like it had been sitting there for days, though I knew he'd just been on shift yesterday. I shrugged it off. Guards sleep on the job. It happens. I wasn't there to report him. I was there for car 3. I walked over to the elevator bank. Car 1 and car 2 were parked at the lobby level, doors closed. But the display for car 3 was blank. No floor number, just a dull, flickering orange dash. I pressed my ear against the brushed steel doors of the shaft. Silence. Usually you can hear the hum of the building, the HVAC systems, the vibration of the transformers, but the shaft behind those doors sounded dead. I popped the service lock with my drop key, a long L-shaped tool, and slid the doors open. The black void of the shaft yawned in front of me. I clicked on my heavy-duty flashlight and shone it upward. The cables stretched up into the darkness, disappearing into the gloom. About 60 feet up, caught somewhere between the 4th and 5th floors, was the bottom of car 3. It was hanging there, perfectly still. But as I stared up at the underside of that cab, a drop of something wet hit my cheek. I wiped it off, expecting oil or hydraulic fluid. It was clear. Just water. Condensation, probably. But then I smelled it. Beneath the scent of grease and metallic dust, there was something else wafting down from the darkness above. It smelled like burning hair and ozone. I secured the safety barricade, grabbed my tool bag, and prepared to climb the service ladder. I had a job to do. To climb up a hoistway ladder is enough to make most people vomit. You're clinging to cold, greasy rungs while the darkness swallows you whole. The only light comes from the narrow beam of your headlamp, cutting through dust motes that have been floating there since the 80s. I reached the top of car 3 after about 5 minutes of climbing. My breathing was loud, echoing off the concrete walls. I stepped off the ladder and onto the car top, my boots clanging against the metal. The car swayed slightly under my weight, a sickening pendulum motion that you never quite get used to. First rule of the job: take control. I flipped the toggle switch on the inspection station to inspect. This cuts off the automatic controller and gives me manual control of the car. Or it's supposed to. I hit the UP and common buttons simultaneously to jog the car. Nothing. The contactors didn't even click. Great, I muttered, my voice sounding flat in the confined space. Electrical. I pulled out my Fluke multimeter and started testing the junction box. 110 volts coming in. But the logic board was acting like it was caught in a loop. It wasn't a mechanical jam. The computer was trying to send the car somewhere, but the safety chain had locked it down because the destination didn't exist. I needed to check the signal wires. I shimmied over to the back of the car operating panel, the box that houses the buttons you press inside the elevator. From the car top, you can access the wiring backside through a maintenance hatch. I used my nut driver to spin off the 4 retaining screws. They were rusted tight, screeching as I forced them to turn. The hatch fell open, revealing the spaghetti mess of multicolored wiring. I shone my light into the cavity, tracing the leads. Ground is green, hot is black. Everything looks standard for a ThyssenKrupp install, except for one bundle. A thick, red-braided cable, the kind used for high-voltage industrial machinery, not low-voltage signals, was spliced into the main board with messy amateur soldering. It bypassed the safety relays entirely. "What the hell did you guys do?" I whispered. I traced the red cable down. It didn't go to the alarm. It didn't go to the fan. It went to a position on the button panel that should have been blank. On the passenger side, inside the car, this spot would just be a flat metal plate below the 22 button. But from back here, looking at the guts of the machine, there was a mechanism. It was a button. A vintage, heavy-duty switch, caked in gray dust. I reached in, my fingers brushing against the cold wires, and wiped the dust off the back of the unit. There was a label, typed on an old typewriter sticker, yellowed with age. Floor 23. I froze. I've serviced Archwood Tower for 6 years. I have the blueprints in my van. I know the roof access is via a stairwell on 22. There is no penthouse. There is no machine room level that requires a button. There is physically no 23rd floor. But the wiring was live. My multimeter read a steady pulsing current running through that red cable. It wasn't just connected, it was waiting. In my line of work, there is a strict protocol for finding unauthorized modifications. You tag it, you lock it out, and you walk away. You don't touch it. You definitely don't activate it. I knew that. I fired apprentices for less. But I was alone in a silent shaft at 3:30 inches the morning, staring at a red wire that defied the architectural reality of the building. The curiosity wasn't a thought, it was an itch in my brain. I needed to know what the circuit did. Just a test, I whispered to myself, my voice sounding thin. Just to see if the relay engages. I didn't climb down into the car to press the button. Instead, I took my insulated screwdriver and carefully bridged the 2 solder points on the back of the 23 switch. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. There was no smooth ramp-up, no gentle pre-torque of the motor. The main contactor slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot, K-A-C-L-A-C-K, and the car lurched upward so hard my knees buckled. I barely managed to grab the crosshead beam to keep from being thrown off the top of the cab. "Whoa, shit," I yelled, but the sound was swallowed by the sudden roar of wind. We were moving. Fast. Too fast. Standard traction elevators in a building this size move at about 350 feet per minute. You feel a gentle tug, and then you glide. This felt like a rocket launch. The guide rails screamed as the rollers fought to keep the car steady. I looked over the edge of the car top, shining my light at the passing floor markings painted on the shaft wall. 15. 16. They were blurring past. The wind noise in the shaft rose to a deafening howl. My stomach dropped as if I were in freefall, but in reverse. Gravity felt heavy, pressing me down against the metal roof of the car. 19, 20. Panic surged in my chest. We were approaching the terminal landing. The overhead clearance in the Archwood Tower is tight, maybe 15 feet above the top floor before you hit the concrete slab of the machine room floor. If the car didn't slow down now, I was going to be crushed between the car top and the building's roof. "Stop, damn it!" I scrambled for the inspection switch, flipping it frantically. The controls were dead. The car was ignoring the safety chain. 21, 22. I curled into a ball, covering my head, bracing for the impact. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the crunch of metal and the end of my life. Whoosh. We shot past the 22nd floor limit switches. I waited for the crash. It didn't come. I opened my eyes. The car was still ascending. I looked up, expecting to see the concrete ceiling rushing at me, but the beam of my flashlight just hit. More darkness. The shaft continued. My ears popped violently, a sharp pain stabbing behind my eyes. The air pressure was plummeting, like we were ascending thousands of feet in seconds. I tasted copper in my mouth, a nosebleed starting. I scrambled to the edge and looked down through the maintenance hatch into the car interior. The digital floor indicator, which usually glowed with a steady red number, was spasming. It wasn't showing 23. It was cycling through shapes that hurt to look at. Inverted triangles, jagged lines, things that looked like letters from a dead language. The whining of the hoist motor reached a pitch so high it vibrated in my teeth. The air grew freezing cold, misting instantly on the metal surfaces. We weren't just going up, we were going away. The stop was worse than the start. There was no gradual braking, no hydraulic hiss of leveling. The car just slammed into a motionless state, shifting from 80 miles an hour to 0 in an instant. I was thrown flat against the metal roof, the breath driven out of my lungs with a wet whoosh. My tool bag skidded across the surface and hit the safety rail with a deafening clang. Then, silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. I lay there for a moment, gasping, waiting for the building to settle. I expected to hear the wind whistling through the roof vents or the hum of the machine room traction motors, but there was nothing. No traffic noise from the street below, no hum of electricity. It was the kind of silence you feel in your ears, like being deep underwater. I rolled onto my knees, my head spinning. Through the open maintenance hatch, I saw the light from inside the car change. The doors below me were opening. I needed to get off the roof, if the car decided to move again. I didn't want to be on top of it. I grabbed my bag and lowered myself through the emergency hatch, dropping onto the carpeted floor of the cab. My boots hit the floor, and the sound died instantly, swallowed by the air. I turned to face the open doors. I should have been looking at a concrete wall, or the bottom of the machine room slab, or, if the roof had failed, the rainy night sky. Instead, I was looking at a hallway. I stepped out, my hand gripping my heavy flashlight like a club. The air hit me first. It didn't smell like an office building. It smelled sterile, sharp, and chemical like a mixture of ozone, bleach, and singed hair. It stung the inside of my nose. "Hello?" I called out. My voice didn't echo. The sound just fell out of my mouth and vanished, as if the walls were absorbing the wavelengths. I looked left, then right. It was a corporate corridor, identical in layout to the floors below, but pristine. Terrifyingly pristine. The carpet was a deep, unblemished charcoal gray. The walls were painted a creamy off-white that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. But the lights were wrong. They didn't buzz, they didn't flicker. They emitted a flat, shadowless white illumination that made everything look two-dimensional, like a high-resolution photograph rather than a physical space. I walked over to the nearest office door. It was mahogany, polished to a mirror shine. There was a gold nameplate screwed into the wood, but it was blank. No name, no title, just smooth, unmarred brass. I checked my watch. 3:38 a.m. I walked to where the window should be at the end of the hall. On the lower floors, this window looked out over the intricate web of city streets and the interstate. I reached the glass and looked out. My breath hitched in my throat. My brain tried to process the input, but it stalled. There was no city, there was no sky, there was no rain. Beyond the glass, there was only a shifting, static, gray void. It looked like the screen of an old television tuned to a dead channel, but it had depth. Swirling, silent clouds of gray dust or fog pressed against the glass. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I turned back to the elevator, desperate to get back in, to force the doors shut and override the system down to the lobby. But the elevator doors were gone. Where the steel doors had been just seconds ago, there was now a smooth, uninterrupted wall of cream-colored drywall. I was trapped on floor 23. I slammed my fist against the wall where the elevator doors had been. The drywall didn't even sound hollow. It landed with a dull, solid thud, like hitting a bag of sand. "Hey!" I screamed, the word ripping out of my throat. "Open the damn door!" No response. Just that flat, dead silence pressing back against my ears. My training kicked in, not the elevator repair training, but the basic survival instinct. Panic kills. That's what they teach you in confined space certification. If you panic, you hyperventilate, you make mistakes, you die. I forced myself to take a breath, but the air was thin and metallic, tasting like pennies. I needed the stairs. In the Archwood Tower, the fire escape is always in the north corner of the central core. I knew the layout of this building better than my own apartment. I turned left and started walking down the corridor. I counted my steps. The building is a square footprint, roughly 120 feet per side. It should have taken me about 40 paces to reach the corner turn. I counted to 40. The hallway stretched on, identical and unchanging. I counted to 80. Still nothing. Just the same mahogany doors with blank brass plates, the same charcoal carpet, the same unblinking fluorescent lights. I stopped. My skin crawled. I looked back the way I came, and a wave of vertigo hit me so hard I had to grab a door handle to stay upright. The hallway behind me, the one I had just walked down, seemed to telescope. It looked miles long, vanishing into a pinpoint of white light in the distance. But when I looked forward, the hallway seemed to compress, the doors clustering together like teeth in a crowded mouth. "This isn't right," I whispered. My hands were shaking so bad the beam of my flashlight jittered against the wall. The building isn't this big. I started walking again, faster this time. A jog, then a sprint. The sound of my heavy work boots thudding against the carpet was the only noise in the universe. I ran until my lungs burned and the stitch in my side felt like a knife wound. I must have run 300 yards. That's 3 football fields. I should have run out the side of the building and fallen into the street 5 minutes ago, but I was still in the hallway. I skidded to a halt, gasping for air, sweat stinging my eyes. The impossibility of it broke something in my brain. I wasn't in the Archwood Tower anymore. Structurally, spatially, this place shouldn't exist. Then, I saw it. About 50 feet ahead, the hallway finally opened up. It widened into a large circular atrium. I walked toward it, my footsteps slowing. In the center of the room sat a massive semicircular reception desk made of dark, polished obsidian. It looked like a black hole cut into the creamy brightness of the room. Behind the desk was a wall of clocks, dozens of them. Typical corporate decor, usually labeled with cities like London, Tokyo, New York. I stepped closer, squinting against the harsh light. These clocks weren't labeled with cities. They were labeled with emotions. Grief, rage, hunger, panic. And the hands on every single clock were spinning wildly, counterclockwise, blurring into black circles against the white faces. The obsidian desk was freezing to the touch, sucking the heat right out of my fingertips as I leaned against it for support. My legs felt like jelly. I needed answers, and in a normal building, the reception desk is where you find them. A thick, leather-bound ledger lay open on the smooth black surface. It looked like a standard visitor sign-in book, the kind with columns for name, time, in, and company. I clicked my pen light on and shone it on the page. The handwriting was jagged, frantic, scratchy lines of black ink that tore through the paper in places. I traced the entries with a trembling finger. Name J. Reynolds. 3:42 a.m. The 12th of August, 2028. Name J. Reynolds. Time 3:42 a.m. Date the 4th of March, 2031. Name J. Reynolds. Time 3:42 a.m. Date the 19th of November, 2035. J. Reynolds. That's me. Jack Reynolds. I flipped back a page. The same name, over and over again. Hundreds of entries. All signed by me, but in a handwriting that deteriorated from my normal script into unreadable scribbles. The dates went back decades into the future, if that makes any sense. My stomach churned. I slammed the book shut, sending a cloud of dust into the stagnant air. That's when I saw the phone. It was a standard office VoIP unit, gray plastic with a small LCD screen. The red indicator light on the top right corner was flashing rapidly. Blink, blink, blink. It was ringing, but there was no sound. In this oppressive, dead silence, that flashing light was deafening. It was a visual scream. I stared at the caller ID screen. It didn't show a number, it just said current. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe it was just habit, the instinct to answer a ringing line. I lifted the receiver and pressed it slowly to my ear. Static, heavy, wet static, like the sound of rain hitting a tin roof. Then, a voice cut through the noise. A dispatch tone on my phone cut through the silence. It was my voice, but it sounded wrong, hollow, metallic, like it was being played through a speaker submerged in water. Priority 1, entrapment. Loke. Archwood Tower. I froze. I was listening to my own internal monologue from 45 minutes ago. I was listening to the thoughts I had while lying in my bed. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in tension ratings. The voice on the line laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a glitching, stuttering sound, like a CD skipping. Ha 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 ha, kirk click. Who is this? I shouted into the receiver. Is this Miller? Is this some kind of joke? The voice on the other end stopped laughing. The tone shifted, dropping an octave, becoming guttural and deep. Car 3 is stuck, my own distorted voice whispered back to me. But Jack isn't stuck. Jack is home. Then came a sound that made me drop the phone. It clattered against the obsidian desk, dangling by its cord. From the tiny speaker, I could still hear it. The sound of wet, heavy breathing. And then, the distinct, sharp sound of an elevator call button being pressed. Ding! The sound didn't come from the phone. It came from behind me, back down the infinite hallway. The single, cheerful ding of the elevator chime hung in the air like a discordant note in a funeral song. It was the sound of arrival. Something had just gotten off an elevator that I knew, for a fact, wasn't there anymore. I spun around, putting the obsidian desk between me and the long corridor. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that seemed to sync up with the room itself. The lights changed first. The flat, clinical whiteness that had made the hallway look like a photograph began to fail. It didn't just flicker out. It pulsed, buzzed. Darkness. Buzzed. Blinding white. Buzzed. Darkness. It was rhythmic, slow, and heavy, like the heartbeat of a dying giant. With every pulse of darkness, the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, reaching out across the carpet like spilling ink. And then came the smell. The ozone and bleach scent was gone, overpowered instantly by a thick, cloying stench. It hit the back of my throat like a physical blow, rotting flowers and copper. It was the smell of a funeral home trying to mask the scent of old blood. I gagged, pulling the collar of my work shirt up over my nose, but the smell seemed to seep through the fabric. Then I heard it. It started at the far end of the corridor, where the perspective narrowed to a point. Slap. Pause. Shh, clack. Slap. Pause. Shh, clack. It was a wet, heavy sound, like a soaking wet towel being dropped onto the floor, followed by something hard bone or claw dragging across the commercial-grade carpet. I clicked off my flashlight. Instinct took over. I didn't want to be a beacon in the dark. I crouched behind the desk, peering over the black stone rim. The hallway lights pulsed again. Dark. Light. In the flash of white, I saw it. It was far away, maybe 100 yards down the hall, but it was big. A silhouette. It looked wrong. It was too tall, skimming the ceiling tiles, and it was asymmetrical. One side of its body seemed to droop, heavy and swollen, while the other side was spindly and jagged. Slap. Shclack. It was moving closer, and it wasn't walking. It was lurching. Every time the lights died, the sound got louder. It wasn't exploring. It wasn't wandering. It was moving with purpose. It was moving toward the reception desk, toward the phone I had dropped, toward me. My breath hitched, freezing in my lungs. My hands, which are steady enough to wire a motherboard with a millimeter of clearance, they were trembling so violently I had to grip the edge of the desk to stop them from drumming against the stone. This wasn't a glitch in reality anymore. It wasn't a dimensional accident. I looked at the clocks on the wall again. The hands on the clock labeled Panic had stopped spinning. They were locked at 12. I wasn't a visitor here. I was prey. The atrium had a second bank of elevators. I had noticed them before because I was too focused on the desk, but there they were. Brushed steel doors set into the far wall, identical to the ones in the real lobby, 22 floors below. The dragging sound was getting louder. Slap. Drag. It was maybe 50 feet away now, echoing down the corridor I'd just come from. I didn't think. I moved. I bolted across the open space of the atrium, my boots skidding on the polished stone floor surrounding the carpet. I hit the call button on the wall. Nothing. No light, no chime. Come on. Come on. I hissed, jamming my thumb against the plastic button until the casing cracked. I jammed my fingers into the center gap of the doors, trying to force them apart. Usually, with enough leverage, you can pop the clutch on the door operator and slide them open. I pulled until the tendons in my forearms screamed. They didn't budge. They weren't just locked. It was like they were welded together. I pulled out my drop key and jammed it into the safety release hole on the upper jamb. It wouldn't turn. The mechanism inside was fused solid. Behind me, the wet, slapping sound stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with violence. The air pressure in the room dropped, making my ears pop again. I slowly turned my head. The entrance to the hallway was dark, bathed in shadow between the rhythmic pulses of the failing lights. But I could smell it. The copper scent was overpowering now, thick enough to taste. It tasted like I'd just bitten through my tongue. I scanned the room. There was nowhere to go. The walls were smooth. The hallway was blocked by it. The reception desk. I dropped to my stomach and scrambled toward the black obsidian semicircle. I slid across the floor, ignoring the friction burn on my elbows, and curled myself into the tight knee hole under the desk just as the lights flashed bright white. I pulled my knees to my chest, burying my face in my arms, trying to make myself invisible. I held my breath, my lungs burning, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was terrified the sound would give me away. Slap. It was in the atrium. Shh. Clack. The sound was different on the stone floor. Sharper. Heavier. I squeezed my eyes shut, but curiosity, that fatal, stupid curiosity, made me open them just a slit. I looked out from the gap under the desk. I saw its legs. They were pale, roughly the color of wet dough, and they were too thin. Impossibly thin, like PVC pipes wrapped in translucent skin. There were no knees, just long, bowed curves of bone, and there were too many of them. I counted 3. No, 4 legs moving in a disjointed staccato rhythm. They didn't walk like a person or an animal. They moved like a spider testing a web. The creature paused. It was standing right in front of the desk, maybe 3 feet from where I was huddled. A drop of thick, dark liquid splattered onto the white floor tiles, inches from my boot. Then another. Drip. Drip. The smell of rot was suffocating. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a cough. Above me, on the surface of the desk, the phone I had dropped rattled. A long, spindly shadow stretched across the floor, elongating as the creature leaned over the desk. It was looking for the source of the noise. It was looking for the J. Reynolds, who had answered the call. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just watched those pale, jointless legs shift on the tiles. A long, translucent claw scraped across the top of the desk, knocking the receiver to the floor. It dangled by the cord, swinging gently back and forth inches from my face. The creature let out a sound. A low, vibrating chitter that felt like a cell phone vibrating against my skull. Then, miraculously, it turned. It seemed to lose interest in the empty desk. The legs pivoted, the wet slapping sound resuming as it shambled away, heading toward the darker shadows of the far hallway. Slap, drag, slap, drag. I waited until the sound was faint, drowned out by the blood rushing in my ears. I saw it then. Across the atrium, past the bank of fused elevators, was a door. Above it glowed the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. A green, battery-powered exit sign. The fire stairwell. Building code mandates that stairwells are structural concrete cores, separate from the floor plates. They are independent environments. If I could get in there, I could slide down the railings all the way to the street. I scrambled out from under the desk, my stiff knees popping, and bolted. I hit the crash bar on the door with my shoulder, hard. It swung open with a heavy metallic clunk, and I stumbled into the stairwell. The air here was colder, smelling of raw concrete and dust. It was a standard commercial stairwell, steel railings, concrete steps, gray paint. It looked real. It looked safe. I didn't walk. I jumped. I grabbed the railing and vaulted the first flight of stairs, skipping 5 steps at a time, landing hard on the landing below. I spun around the turn and kept going. Down. Just go down. I descended 3 full flights. My boots hammered the concrete, the noise echoing up and down the shaft. By my count, I should be at the 19th floor. I reached the landing door. It was painted a dull gray. I grabbed the handle, desperate to get into the main building, to see a normal carpet, to hear a normal HVAC hum. I ripped the door open and burst through. "Help! Someone call!" The words died in my throat. I wasn't on the 19th floor. I was standing at the end of a long, cream-colored hallway. The carpet was charcoal gray. The lights were flickering in a rhythmic heartbeat. And 50 yards away, in the center of a circular atrium, sat a black obsidian desk. I stopped, my momentum nearly pitching me forward onto the carpet. I spun around and looked at the door I had just come through. I looked at the stairs behind me. I had gone down. I physically felt the gravity. I had descended 40 feet, but I was standing in the exact same spot I had started. "No," I whispered, backing away. "That's impossible." I turned back to the stairwell door. I grabbed the handle again. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I went up by mistake. Panic makes you stupid. I ran back into the stairwell. This time, I looked at the number painted on the concrete wall of the landing. It didn't say 22. It didn't say 23. It was a symbol, a circle with a line through it, intersecting with a triangle. I looked down the center gap of the stairwell, the space between the railings where you can usually see all the way to the bottom. There was no bottom. The stairs spiraled down into an infinite misty gray abyss, and when I looked up, they spiraled up into the same endless fog. I wasn't in a building anymore. I was in a loop, a closed circuit. From the atrium behind me, the wet slapping sound returned. It was louder this time, faster. It heard the door open. The stairwell was a lie. The hallway was a loop. There was no running. There was no hiding. I backed out of the stairwell, letting the heavy fire door click shut behind me. I stood on the edge of the atrium, my chest heaving, staring at the fused steel doors of the elevator shaft. That metal box was the only thing in this hellscape that connected to the real world. It was the needle that had stitched these two dimensions together. If I wanted to leave, I had to reopen the wound. I looked at the call button panel on the wall, the one I had smashed my thumb against earlier. "Think, Jack. Think," I whispered, my voice trembling. I couldn't pry the doors open. The mechanical clutch was locked. But the electrical system. If I could short the door open signal at the hall station, I might be able to trick the controller into releasing the lock. It was a long shot. It was dangerous. In the real world, it would get my license revoked. Here, it was my only prayer. I dropped to my knees in front of the panel. I dug into my tool bag, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my Allen key set. Clatter. The sound of the metal keys hitting the floor tile was sharp and loud. From the dark corridor to my left, the wet slap drag sound stopped instantly. I froze. Then, the rhythm changed. It wasn't dragging anymore. It was scampering, fast. A chaotic, multi-limbed scurrying sound, like a giant crab on tile. I jammed the 1/8" hex key into the security screw at the bottom of the faceplate. It wouldn't turn. Rusted. Or maybe just warped by this place. "Turn, you son of a bitch," I gritted out through clenched teeth. I grabbed the L handle with both hands and wrenched it. Screech. The screw gave way with a noise, like a banshee wailing metal grinding against metal, echoing loudly through the silent atrium. The scurrying sound exploded into a sprint. I ripped the faceplate off the wall, exposing the low-voltage wiring behind it. Red, white, blue. I needed to bridge the red 24 volts, power to the white, signal. I fumbled for my insulated screwdriver. Sweat was stinging my eyes, blinding me. I wiped my face on my shoulder, leaving a streak of grease and grime. I looked up. At the far end of the atrium, emerging from the shadows, was the entity. Now that it was in the open, I wished I hadn't seen it. It was vaguely humanoid, but stretched, like taffy pulled too thin. It had no face, just a smooth, pale surface where features should be. But down the center of its torso, the skin was split open, revealing rows of vibrating metallic teeth. It saw me. It didn't roar. It didn't growl. It opened that vertical mouth and let out a sound that I still hear in my nightmares. It sounded like a subway train screeching on the tracks, overlaid with the sound of a woman screaming underwater. A high-pitched metallic shriek that vibrated in my fillings and made my vision blur. It dropped onto all fours using its arms and those spindly, kneeless legs and charged. It was fast. Impossibly fast. I looked back at the wires. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't steady the screwdriver tip. "Come on!" I screamed at my own hands. The creature was halfway across the atrium. I could see the drool thick, black ichor flying from its split torso. I jammed the screwdriver into the terminal block, forcing the tip between the red and white leads. Spark. A shower of blue sparks exploded in my face, blinding me. The sparks burned my cheeks, but behind the flash, I heard the sweetest sound in the world. The heavy mechanical groan of the door clutch engaging. The steel doors shuddered and began to slide apart. I didn't wait for them to open fully. The moment the gap was wide enough to fit my shoulders, I threw myself forward. I dove headfirst into the car, scrambling on the carpet, kicking my legs frantically to get my boots clear of the threshold. Close! Close! I screamed, smashing the door closes button with my fist. The creature was airborne. I saw it mid-leap, a blur of pale, wet flesh and vibrating teeth. The doors began to slide shut. Slowly. Too slowly. I saw a hand, a long, jointless limb with translucent claws, shoot through the narrowing gap. It slashed blindly at the air, missing my face by inches. The smell of rotting flowers filled the cab, choking me. Then, the doors slammed together. Wham! The impact shook the entire car. The metal buckled inward, leaving a dent the size of a bowling ball right in the center of the steel panels. A high-pitched screech tore through the other side, followed by a wet, tearing sound. Then, the floor dropped out from under me. The car didn't descend. It fell. The connection to that impossible floor had been severed, and gravity returned with a vengeance. We were in free fall. My stomach slammed into my throat. I floated off the floor for a split second, weightless, surrounded by my floating tools, screwdrivers, wrenches, the multimeter all suspended in the air like debris in zero gravity. The digital display on the wall screamed. 23. 15. 8. The numbers were blurring. We were plummeting down the shaft at terminal velocity. The wind roared outside the cab, a deafening hurricane. I curled into a ball, wrapping my arms around my head. Safeties! Catch, damn it, catch! The overspeed governor, a mechanical safety device at the top of the shaft, must have spun out. It triggered the safety jaws under the car. Screek. The sound was like the world ending. The steel wedges bit into the guide rails, trying to stop a 4,000-pound car moving at 80 miles an hour. The deceleration wasn't instant, it was violent staccato. The car shuddered, jumped, and then slammed to a halt. I was thrown against the floor. Snap. The sound was louder than the screeching metal. A jagged, hot bolt of lightning shot up my right leg. I screamed, my vision going white. I lay there on the carpet, gasping, tasting bile and blood. The car was listing to one side, hanging crooked in the shaft. The lights were dead. The emergency battery light flickered on, casting a dim, sickly yellow glow over the interior. I looked down at my leg. My right foot was facing the wrong way. The ankle was shattered, the bone pressing visibly against the leather of my work boot. But through the ringing in my ears, I heard something else. Outside the car, faintly, I heard the hum of the lobby vending machine. I heard the distant wail of a police siren on the street. Real sounds. I started to laugh, a hysterical, sobbing sound that mixed with the pain. I was alive. The fire department had to use the jaws of life to get me out. The safety wedges had bitten so deep into the rails that the car was practically welded to the shaft walls. When they finally pried the doors open at the lobby level, I didn't see a monster. I saw the confused, terrified face of Miller, the night guard, and a team of firefighters looking at me like I was insane. They told me the car had dropped from the 5th floor. That's what the computer log said. A mechanical failure. A catastrophic loss of traction. I tried to tell them about the 23rd floor, about the infinite hallway, about the thing with the split torso. The paramedics sedated me before I could finish the story. They said I was in shock. They said the oxygen levels in the shaft were low and I was hallucinating from hypoxia. I lost my job 2 days later. Metro State Lift Services didn't just fire me. They threatened to sue. According to their report, I had manually overridden the safeties, bypassed the governor, and vandalized the interior control panel. They found the panel ripped off the wall, wires exposed. But they didn't find the red wire. They didn't find the button labeled 23. When the investigators checked the car, they said the wiring was standard. No unauthorized mods, no hidden switches. Just a broken elevator and a technician who had apparently snapped. I walked with a cane for 6 months. My ankle never healed right, it clicks every time it rains. But the physical pain is nothing compared to the nights. I spent my recovery doing research. I dug into the city archives, looking for the original permits for the Archwood Tower. It wasn't easy. Most of the records from the late 80s are gathering dust in basements, but I found it. The original architectural plans for the Archwood Tower called for 24 floors. Construction was halted in 1989 after a series of on-site fatalities involving the framing crew on the upper levels. The developers quietly capped the building at 22 and sealed off the structural framework for the floors above. They erased them from the blueprints. They erased them from the directory. But you can't erase a space just by taking down a sign. That space still exists. It's just one, untethered. It's a pocket of dead air and lost time, rotting on top of the building like a gangrenous limb, and something has moved in. I don't work in elevators anymore. I work at a landscaping supply yard now. Everything is on the ground floor. I don't go into high-rises. If I have a doctor's appointment on the 4th floor, I take the stairs. I don't care how much my ankle hurts, because sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet room, I hear it. A faint, wet, dragging sound. Slap, drag, and yesterday, I found something that made me install 3 deadbolts on my apartment door. I was cleaning out my old tool bag, the one I had with me in the shaft. I hadn't opened it since that night. At the bottom of the bag, tangled in a roll of electrical tape, was a piece of paper. It was a page torn from a visitor logbook. The paper was black, the ink white. Name: J. Reynolds. 3:42 a.m. Date: the 12th of August, 2028. I checked the calendar. That's 2 years from now. I escaped floor 23. I know I did. But every time I look at that date, I get this cold, heavy feeling in my gut that the elevator ride isn't over. I'm just on a long pause. If you're ever in an elevator late at night and you see a button that shouldn't be there, or a floor number scratched into the metal that doesn't exist, don't touch it. Don't even look at it. Get out. Run. And don't look back, because it knows your name now, and it's patient.